So hey guys, I'm excited to be here with you guys this morning. Amy asked me about a month ago if I would come and speak. See some familiar faces, some people I haven't seen before, and this is probably my second or third time speaking at young adults. So they asked me today to speak on what it means to be present where God has you. So last night, what did you guys talk about? Just being present with Christ. Today we're going to talk about let's be present where God has you. And so it's 9:36. They didn't tell me how long I had. So you got a black guy up here in a K-State game at 11. So we might go to about 10:59 if you guys are good with that. But I want to ask you guys a question. Go ahead and get out your phones. I got two questions. Or actually, I got one question, and then I want you to write something down. Get out your phones. Connect to Wi-Fi. And I want you guys to go to menti.com and then type in that code that's on the screen. So if you guys are having trouble seeing that, I can say it out loud. Just let me know. All right, the code is 3656-9568. Thank you. So the first, everybody, so here we go. A whole bunch of people liking this. All right. Awesome. Let's see how far we can get this thing to go up. All right. Dalton, can you go to the next slide for me? Here's my question that I have for you. If you had to describe the season you're in using one word, what word would you use? Growth. Exhausting. Focused. Anticipation. In between. Uncertainty. Deciding. Challenge. Newness. Busy. Prayerful. Confusing. Planning, faith, tiring. Surreal. I like that one. So I think that's probably everybody in the room so far. It's interesting. We were all in a different place. So my job is to try to encourage 41 different people about being present in the season that you're in. It's going to be a fun time. Really fun time. So the question is, how do you be present where God has you? Here's the other thing I want you to do is I want you to write down a number from 1 to 10. Any number between 1 and 10. No rhyme or reason, just write down any number. Everybody have their number? Okay. We'll come back to that later on. So, how do you be present with where God has you in this season of life? Because we're all in a different season of life. If I were to describe my season of life that I'm in right now, I would say it's surreal. I'm just kind of blown away right now with God. Well, what does it mean to be present with where God has you? And I think the first thing that we have to do is, one, we have to be aware that He's there. And we have to be aware that he cares. To be aware of his presence. I think it's really easy in this season of life that you guys are in. Your young 20s, maybe mid 20s. And I know for me in my mid 20s, it was easy to just not be aware that God was with me every single day. That he's there. Right? Like I've struggled with this up until like I'll be honest with you guys, like the last 8 months. The fact that he's there and also that he cares. How many of you guys would say, and you don't have to raise your hand, but you truly can sense God's presence every single day and God's care for you every single day? I know for me, that's a really hard thing. To know that God is with me in every single moment of every single day. Like he's with us right now. Like, do y'all believe that? And that he cares about us. Physically, he's not here. Spiritually, he is. I think I was talking with Amy and Ryan about just what Lee talked about last night, and she was talking about how you guys are on Netflix 2 hours a day and all this stuff. And there's I don't know if you guys kind of struggle with the same thing, but sometimes I feel like God is just off somewhere else. Like he's up in heaven, scrolling Instagram, watching Netflix. Just really, he doesn't really care that much about the season of life that I'm in. Anybody else feel that? I got one hand. 2, 3, 4, 4.5. And here's the thing, guys, is that the season that you're in right now is that God he's aware of that. He didn't make a mistake of where you're at. He has you exactly where he wants you to be for the right reason. You may have made some mistakes, but God did not make a mistake with where you're at. One of the things that I've struggled with over the last 8-9 years of my life is I've got some buddies right now who are playing in the National Football League. And so there was a time period of my life where I felt like I made some mistakes and that God took football away from me. And I remember talking to my wife during different seasons. I mean, we'd have conversations year after year after year and just saying, like, if I just would have done this differently, if I just would have did this, like maybe I would have been in the NFL. And like I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter and I'm seeing guys that I've played with who are signing $39 million contracts, a $65 million contract. And you know what I'm feeling? Just take a guess. Jealous? What else do you think I'm feeling? Angry? Regret? Like, dang it! That could have been me. Right? And what my wife has told me time after time is God has you exactly where he wants you. God has you exactly where he wants you. And for a long time, I didn't believe that. For a long time, I felt like I was in punishment, in purgatory, living hell on earth, because I'd made some mistakes in the past. But the truth is that God has you exactly where he wants you for a reason. And he's there in the midst of every single day. Second thing is that he cares. He really does. He cares about the intimate details of your life. There's a passage that says, Jesus says this, that God knows the exact number of hairs on your head. Think about that. Everybody in this room, God knows the exact number of hairs on your head. So how do you be present with God where he has you right now? Is one, you have to be aware that he's there, and you have to be aware that he cares about you. Because if we don't start there, doesn't matter what else we do, right? Doesn't matter how many times we read our Bibles, how many times we pray, how many times we do X, Y, Z. We can do all the spiritual activities, but if we're not aware that he's there and that he cares, we won't be present with him in the midst of life, in the midst of the hard things, in the midst of the good things, right? We won't. Second thing, how do you be present with where God has you? How do you be faithful with where God has you? Is you got to be attentive. So I've got, all these are A. So my next 2 points. So the first one is aware. The next one is attentive. The last one's going to be an A. And then I'm going to switch letters on you at the end, okay? The next one is attentive. You have to be attentive to how God may be working in and through your life. You have to be attentive to how God may be working in and through your life. Because the reality is your life is more than just, like everything that you're going through is more than just for your own personal good. You guys have probably heard the corny phrase, your misery becomes your ministry. Amy has probably said that to you guys, I don't know how many times. But it's true, right? Like the things that you go through become the things that God uses in your life to help other people. I think about the story of Moses and him leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. How long did Moses spend before he led the people out of Egypt? Does anybody know? Be quiet. How long? 40
years.
40 years. What was he doing those 40 years? Shepherding what? Sheep. Like, that's like the worst job in the world. Shepherding sheep, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, not for 3, for 40. How old are you guys? Mid-20s? All right, so for the next 40 years, I want you guys to go 10 sheep. How many of you guys would sign up for that? You would? You're crazy. Sign me up, God. I want to go 10 sheep. Let me do it. Fend off lions and bears and tigers and whatever else. Here's the thing, guys, is that sometimes what God used Moses to go do because he was tending sheep for 40 years is what allowed him to do the things that he did after he did that. And that God is working. We have to be attentive to what God is doing in our lives because it's more than just for us. It's more than just for my own personal good or my own personal glory or my own personal kingdom. Like God is doing something when you feel busy and when you feel uncertain and you feel confused and you're struggling, God is doing something in you right now for the next season of life. And sometimes you don't always see it. Sometimes we can be inattentive to what God is doing. Sometimes we can ignore what God is doing. Sometimes we can just be on the struggle bus for way too long. And the truth is that God is doing something in and through your life right now that He's going to use later on. And that's the fun part. We just sang that beautiful song, I'm the vine and you are the branch. Like we're grafted into Christ. And He's with us all the time. And He's working in us. And He's growing us. And He's producing fruit in us. Does the branch ever get to taste its own fruit? No. Who's that fruit for? It's for other people. we have to be attentive to how God may be working in our lives and what he's doing in these seasons that we're in. And if we're not attentive to that, if we're not paying attention, y'all ever been in a conversation where you're like, somebody keeps saying something, you're like, you kind of check out, and then you just kind of give the, oh yeah, that's crazy. Oh. Oh wow, that's wild. Yeah. Gosh, I can't wait to be out of this conversation. Here's the deal, guys. Every single day, God is talking to you. And some of us just go, oh, wow, God, that's crazy. Oh, that's wild. No way. Ha, 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 ha. And we're not. Hey, pay attention. We're not paying attention to what God is doing. And we have to be. If we want to be present with the Lord and present in the season that we're in, we have to be attentive. Here's the truth, guys. Is there anybody in this room outside of their 20s? I know, Amy.
Thanks, guys.
Ryan, are you 30 now? Welcome. Hey, welcome to the club. How old are you?
18.
Okay, yeah, you look young. You look like a little baby. Here's the deal. I would say, if I'm honest with you guys, the 20s, probably the hardest season of life. I'm not going to lie. Your 20s are the hardest season of your life because you're starting over, right? You've made it through high school. If you went to college, you've made it through college, and now you get plopped down in a city and you're starting over. It's hard. You're starting over with potentially new friends in a new city, new church, new work. And you're at the bottom of the totem pole. You're the peon. You go to work every single day and you're just punching the clock. Anybody else think their 20s are hard? Like, be honest. Raise your hand if you think your 20s are hard. Got somebody with two hands back there. Here's the reason why it's hard as well, because you got people who are going to experience different seasons than you in your 20s. People who get married at 22 or 23 and you're 27 and you haven't been married yet. People who are having kids in their 20s and you've never dated anybody before. People who are making a whole bunch of money and you're still making minimum wage, right? There's this thing that will kind of get us off kilter, that we'll look at other people's lives and we'll go, God, what the are you doing in my life? Like, what's going on? I don't get it. And sometimes it causes us to tune out God. Like, I'm going to tune out all this quiet time stuff that I heard last night from Lee. Like, that's not really, like, I need to focus on other things to get my life to the point where I want it to be. Don't tune him out, tune him up, because he's trying to say something to you. He's trying to grow you. And it's not just for you, it's for somebody else. The 20s were the hardest season of my life. I am now, how old am I? 34. And I look back, I was telling Ryan this, I look back now on my 20s. My 20s sucked. It sucked. I would never go back and do them again. But now I see the reasons why. I see the fruit of all the work that I put in the 20s. And you know what that makes me do? Makes me excited for the future. Makes me attentive to God's presence now, because I know that in everything He is going to work it out for the good. I may not realize it now, but as long as I stay aware of His presence and attentive to what He's doing in my life, it's going to cause me to be present with Him wherever He has me. And I'll continue to learn. The last thing, the last A, how do we stay present? How do we be present with where God has us? Is we have to be appreciative of the opportunities to steward His resources. Let me ask you guys this. What's the most valuable resource that you have right now? Okay, time.
Myself.
Yourself? Okay. He said, I don't have much. It's just got me, myself, and I. What else? Huh?
A small bit of cash.
A small bit of cash? Left over? Well, I want you to think about what is your most valuable resource that you have right now. Everybody's going to be different. But since we have 42 people in 42 different spots, I would say you're probably your most valuable resource that God has given you right now is your time. We've all been given it, but we all don't have an equal amount of it. Think about that. What do I mean when I say that? We've all been given it, but we don't have an equal amount of it. There's going to be some of you, or people that you know, hopefully not any of you guys in here, who don't make it to 65. May not make it to 45. May not make it to 35. Like, that's wild. Think about that. There are people that you know who may not make it to 35. And your most valuable asset that God has given you, your most valuable resource that He's given you is your time. Acts 17, Paul is in the place where they've got all these foreign gods. And there's this quote that he says is that God has appointed the time and place like where everybody should live. And it kind of goes back to my thing. There's no mistake of where God has you and where He's placed you and the things that but He's given you an amount of time for you to use it. So my question is what's your attitude towards the time or the resources that He's given you? You guys want some more A words? Is your attitude to be apathetic towards it? Are you apathetic towards life right now? Oh, what's the point, God? What's the point of trying? What's the point of doing good? What's the point of this? Like, I never get ahead. So why would I continue to do it? Why would I continue to just put in the heart? Like, is your attitude one of, it's just aloof, it's apathetic? Where you may be longing for the days of the past. I wish things were like this again, God. I wish we were back in Egypt, like the Israelites said when they were on their exodus. I wish we were back in Egypt building pyramids. Really? Ecclesiastes 7:10 says this. And Ecclesiastes is a weird book. I thought about using some of that. I was like, I'm not going to, no. It's a weird book. But it says this, Ecclesiastes 7:10, do not say, why were the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. It's not wise to look back when I just wish I was in college again. Oh my goodness, like it was so much better then. It's not wise to ask those questions. It's not wise to think that way. So are you aloof? Is your attitude one where you're just aloof and you're apathetic? Next one. Next question. Are you angry or are you argumentative with God right now about the season that you're in? Are you mad? Nobody put mad up here. But in your struggle, in your pain, in your uncertainty, in your stress, in your planning, in your stagnation, are you mad at God? Which causes you to not be present with Him and not be present in this season. Not going to spend too much time on that one. Are you annoyed? God hasn't given you what you wanted yet. Are you anxious? Are you afraid? Our attitude towards the things that God has given us will determine what we do with those things. And if our attitude is one of annoyance, apathetic, argumentative, anxious, or afraid, then we won't be present right where God has us. It's a beautiful thing. I walked outside this morning. This is my favorite season of the year. Walk outside, you can wear a hoodie. And it's so easy just to walk outside and just go to your car and go to work. So easy just to not just be aware of what God is doing and how He may be working in your life and using all of the opportunities, all of the resources, all of the things that God has given you for His glory, for your good, and just be present there and enjoy the season. Okay? So, aware. I want you guys to be aware of His presence, aware that He's there and aware that He cares. Second one, I want you to be attentive to how He may be working in your life. This is how you stay present. Be attentive to what God is saying, what God is doing in your life, not only for you, but for the good of other people, and then be appreciative of all the resources that God has given you. So, what are going to be some hindrances to you? Now, this is where I'm going to change letters on you. We're going to go to C's. What are going to be some of the hindrances to being present where God has you? First C, cares of life. You guys know the parable of the weeds. Guy goes along, he tosses some seeds out. The weed grows up, and what happens? What does the word say? It gets choked out. You're a big guy, come here. You grow up. This is literally what the cares of life will do to you. You ready? Yep. I know. You guys are going to lose today, by the way. I'm just kidding. The cares of life, this is what they do. They come and they choke you out. Now, do they just do this? Is this what is it? Am I choking them out right now? No. You all right? I'm good. You good? All right. I'm not choking them out right now, right? We're just having a good old time up here. But if I start to squeeze, this is what the cares of life are going to do to you and your faith, right? I'm not even squeezing yet, right? And they're just going to start squeezing and squeezing and squeezing to where you're not alive anymore. That's what the cares of life will do to you and will cause you to not be present with where God has you. They will literally kill you. They will choke you out. What are your cares of life that you have right now? That may be choking out where God has you. Is it marriage? Is it family? Is it money? And what does it look like for you to have faith with God about that thing right now? What does Hebrews say? That we walk by what? And not by what? We walk by what? And not by what? What does the world tell you to put your eyes and your focus on? Just yell them out. I want to hear. Success, money, self. What else? What else? Reputation. Luxury? Huh? Tragedy. What else does the world tell you put your eyes on? Relationships. And those things can worry us. But we live by faith that God is going to take care of us, that God is in the midst of everything with us. Do we pay attention to the things around us? Yes, of course. But we live by faith that he's there with us every single day, and not by the things that we can necessarily see. And that's hard when you have your culture that it's all about the appearances. Second one, what's the second hindrance? Comparison. I think Teddy Roosevelt said this: comparison is a thief of all joy. And it'll distract you from being present where God has you. And being appreciative of where God has you. Because it might suck where you're at. But does it only suck because you're comparing yourself to somebody else? Here's another hindrance to being present. The corruption of your flesh. You have a real enemy that wants to destroy you. And just like I choked out this Cornhusker up here, you're fighting your flesh every single day. This, I wasn't going to go here, but this is how Paul describes the flesh in Romans chapter 6. It's called the body of death. You guys, anybody know what the body of death meant back in his time? No. Can I use you again? No, we're going to switch roles. Okay. So when you come to, you're not going to choke me out. I didn't choke you out. Here's what your flesh. Here's what the body of death is. When someone would commit murder, what they would require of them is they would require them to carry on that body of flesh around with them. So go ahead, jump on my back. Come on. And this is how we're going through life with our sin nature. Is we're going around life with this body of death on us. Right? This is weird. But this is life. You having fun? Yeah. This is life. And the corruption of your flesh wants to kill you, wants to drag you down, wants you to not be present where God has you. And who's going to rescue you from that? Who's going to rescue you from that? Who is it? Christ. Christ is the only one that can rescue you from that. But if you choose to hang on to your flesh and the corruption of your flesh, you will not be able to be present where God has you or walk the way that he wants you to walk and move the way that he wants you to move. You have got to get that body of flesh off of you and move forward with him. Not with yourself, with him. Because he's going to guide you and he's going to direct you. And he's going to work and he's going to move and he's going to ask you to do things that may be outside of your comfort zone. And he may ask you to do things that with that body of flesh on you, you cannot do. Some of you may be there right now. And the only way that you can truly be present with him is get that thing off your back. Next one. Next distraction, next hindrance from being present with where God has you is to be competitive in all the wrong areas. To be totally about your own selfish ambition. Next one. Next hindrance is to be conceited. It takes humility to be teachable, and it takes humility to be patient and wait on what God is doing in your life. If we think that God owes us something for how we've performed spiritually, you got it all wrong. He doesn't owe us a thing. And being arrogant and being conceited and thinking that God owes you something will cause you to not be present with where he has you. It'll cause you to be discontent and crabby and mean, and just not somebody that anybody wants to spend time around. Not everything in my life is where I want it to be. Not everything in your life is where you want it to be. Are you okay with that? The last one is complacency. God may be working in your life and moving and doing things, but if you're complacent with just where you're at, it's good enough. You're not attentive to where the Spirit may be leading you and what he's doing in your life, there's no way that you're going to be present with him where he has you and where he's taking you. So, cares of life, comparison, corruption, competition, conceit, and complacency. I actually, you guys wrote down a number earlier. The reason why I had you guys write down the numbers because it reminds me. Actually, take out that number, and I just want to hear. I want to hear the numbers that you guys wrote. 6, 7, 3, 2, 9, 4. Okay. Here's what I want you guys to imagine now. So I want you to imagine that number being the things that God is giving you right now in this season of life. If you wrote a 9, like my homeboy in the back there, life is good. If you wrote a 2, is life still good? And here's what I want you to think about. There's a parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25, verse 14, if you guys want to reference. There's a master who's going away on a long journey, and he gives his servants talents. One of them he gave 5, one of them he gave 2, the other one he gave 1. You know what it says what the first 2 did? Is immediately they went away and they doubled it. I think it would have been really hard for them to go and double what God had given them if they had a bad attitude about the talents that they had, if they were comparing themselves to other people, if they were all concerned and had to anxious and afraid about whatever's going to come, like I have these talents. But they weren't. The first 2 guys immediately at once went and doubled them. Now, you wrote down a number. Let's say that represents your spiritual life right now. Let's say that represents the talents that God has given you. My question for you is, how are you going to double that? Can you double that if you're worried about the future? Can you double that if you're discontent with where you're at? Because here's the thing, guys. The truth is, some of you guys have been given 5, some of you guys have been given 2, some of you guys have been given 1. It wasn't up to us. God just gave them to you. So the question is, what are you going to do with it? Can you do anything with it if you're not present with him right then and there? If you're always worried about the future, will you do anything about the now? if you're not present with God on a day-to-day basis like these men were in this story, you will never double what it is that God has given you. And at the end of your life, at the end of the day, when God says it's time to come home, we will all stand before him. And it won't be, hey, did you dream enough? Did you do all these, did you just think about, there's going to be a day where it stops. We're done. We're not worried about the next day. And will you have been found faithful with the time that you were given, with the situations that you were given, with the seasons of life that you're in? You can't be faithful and you can't be present if you're worried about the future or you're worried about all these other things. You have to be present. You have to be aware, attentive, and appreciative of what God is doing in and through your life in order to have an opportunity to double it for the Master's glory. I think that's like the best part of walking with the Lord, is that he has a plan for every single one of us. I think he wants us to double the things that he's given to us, whatever that may be. For the good of other people, for the good of his glory, and for the good of his kingdom. In order for us to do that, we have to be present where he has us today and be faithful with that. Every single day, every single season of life. All right, let me pray first. Father, we thank you just for an opportunity to be away, to get away, to think about you and the work that you're doing in our lives and the season of life that you have us in. And God, we know that you've given each one of us talents. You've given each one of us an ability to impact your kingdom. And you invite us into that. God, and the only way that we can do that is if we are with you every single day, because you promised us that you would be with us to the very end of the age. God, I pray that we would be aware of your presence. We would be aware that you're there and that you care about us, God, that we would be attentive to what you're teaching us in the different seasons of life that we're in, God, and that you would help us to be appreciative and that we would show our appreciation for what it is that you've given us through the way that we steward the resources, whether that's time, whether that's money, influence, whatever it is, Lord. Help us to be present in the here and now so we can be found faithful stewards of the things that you've given to us. God, be with us the rest of the day. Be with us as we go forward. Help us to glorify you and be good stewards of those things. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.